get my music off. So what's up, everybody? If you are in chat, just give me a quick hello. I'm having some weird issues with chat at the moment, so I'm hoping that it's coming through, but we'll see in a second. Looks like it's updating all right. So anyway, if you're in chat and you want to participate, feel free to say a quick hello before we get going. Tonight we're going to be talking about X-rays and X-ray shader and how to get this set up. I've got the promo shot set up here, and I'm going to walk through it a little bit, and then we'll just create one from scratch. Close that out. And I'm really hoping chat is working. All right. Let's give it another minute or two to see if it catches up. For a second. Send myself a message. Staying chat. See if that shows up. Looks like it's showing up. All right, cool. That's good to know. What's up, Nelu? Thanks for joining. I'm going to give it another minute or two, and then we'll start talking about this and breaking it down and building up our own. I'll just render this for the time being. What size am I at? Yeah, I don't need that 1920. There we go. I'll speed it up a little bit. Don't need to be 4K for this. Chat test. Thank you. I think yeah, it looks like it's showing up on the screen. So if you've seen the promo piece floating around Facebook or Twitter or wherever, you'll notice it's the same thing sitting here. Mostly what I'm going to be talking about is the fresnel, the curvature, and then just some noises that I've composited together into a bump map. And that's generally what makes this up. So the way I got to this is I actually started with a simpler model and then built it up from there. And I think that's probably the best bet going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into this new scene and we'll get started. And we don't need bucket rendering for that. So let's go ahead and bring in a model of some sort. I think I was using a dragon before. Let's see if I can find that. Yep, Stanford dragon. Bring that in. No materials, cool. So there we go, we've got our dragon. I'm just gonna grab a cyc wall really quickly. I think I have one in here, yep, cool. And we'll add a camera in. lights. So an area light here. Just going to lock that view. This area light is huge, something like probably 50 by 50 will do the job. Yeah, that's looking okay. It's even maybe 25 by 25. That dragon's pretty small. Something like that. And maybe another one. Do this one over top. Like so. Oh, it didn't lock my camera in. There we go. Hopefully that will do it from now on. Yep, okay, cool. Alright, so we've got this dragon. It may be worth blowing up just a little bit in scale. And we're going to make a new shader. And we'll just call this XRay. Go ahead and throw it on here. Drago, make sure that's dragon. Alright, so nothing really fancy going on, just a shader with material on it. And you know, you can try a bunch of different things to get this to work, and you know, go into your opacity and start playing with that and lower it down a little bit, and you'll see it gets transparent, and you bring it back up a little bit and it kind of looks ghostly. And so, you know, after playing with that a couple times, you realize you got to do some tricks. So the first trick that I really thought about was thinking, how can you still show a majority of the body while keeping it kind of flowing with opacity? So what I mean by flowing is it kind of flows in and out, and it picks up on details, but it still is transparent a bit. So I immediately thought the Fresnel shader might do that. And what the Fresnel shader does is basically like IOR. It's whatever viewing angle you're at affects Fresnel. So let me add this on. So if I rotate around here, you'll see that based on our viewing angle is you get this fall off, and now I'm hitting the cyc wall. But so if you pay attention right in here, this white area, if I come back around, that white starts to come back in, and it's because we're changing our viewing angle. So as I move this way, you'll see all this white around the edges here comes back in. And if I go back this way, it changes. So no matter what angle you're looking at it, it's going to change a little bit. But, you know, it gives this really nice fall off effect. So if I hook this back up, we come in here, and I'm going to use this as our main opacity. And what I'll probably have to end up doing is throwing on a ramp to really control it. But if you adjust your index of refraction, you'll start to notice that you get some detail back in there. And you can control your fall off here. I really like to control it with a ramp. Come in here, get a ramp, put that back in. Let me open this back up a little bit more so you can see that. And we're going to change this to Alt. Kind of tighten that up a little bit. I think I may have to reverse it some. There we go. That might actually be going too far. Pull this back down some. Might have to reference my other shader because this should be falling off better. Okay, no, I didn't need to reverse that. Okay, there we go. Bring this back in. I can tighten this up a little bit. So what I like to do is just throw a little bit of noise on there too. So it gives some imperfections, not too much because you see it will start to bring it back in, but something like that. So that's good. We got some transparency going on, but it's not really giving the glow that we need for this to happen. And so when I looked at X-rays, and I'll go back into my original one just to show it, you'll notice in actual X-rays that most of the lighting happens around the curves of the body, like right here around the top of the skull and the head, and then the lips in here, and then the rest is really transparent and translucent and allows for the details of the inner body to come through. So the way I ended up doing that was I got a curve map and started playing with it for the emission color. So we're going to go back in here. We're going to get a curvature map, curvature node, and we'll just hook that up to our emissions. And just to show you what is happening with the curve node, you'll see all the curves of the body in here start to get mapped out. So we can go into our curvature node, and I'm going to increase the samples just to get a little bit better resolution on there. And if we blow out the radius, you'll see this blows out, and then if we come in really tight, it gets really tight as well, 0.05. And I think this is the one that I ended up doing just because I want to keep it as, nope, sorry, I didn't have it the other way. I want to keep it out of the center as much as possible. Gotta choose your numbers wisely. So I think something like that should do it, and we'll connect this back up. So I'm going to increase our emission weight to something like 1.25, and now you'll see around the edges here we're getting some glow. If I bring this back up, I think what I should do is just give us some more detail. We're already at 1024. Okay, that's all right. I'm going to set that to 64 just so I can hop into Bucket really quick and clean it up for you guys. So you see in the detail here, we're starting to get some emission coming off the edges. I think we might have to go up to 0.6 a bit, just to really introduce some glow. All right, so that's all well and good. And if we come back, I'm going to be hopping back and forth just to kind of show you details that I'm pulling in and working towards. So what you'll notice is that because of how X-rays work, there's really light coming from everywhere, and so I really wanted the strongest parts to be around the edges, like I said, but we still need something to be happening in these areas too. We don't want it to be too powerful, but we still want to give something that's not so glassy feeling and more of a little bit of an emissions to it. So I baked in this color composite down here between the Fresnel and the curvature map. What's up, Sensitive Cube? How you doing, man? So what we're going to do is bring in a color composite and start to composite some stuff together. Composite, there we go. So first, we're going to have this as our base, and our blend, and put this into our emissions. And you'll see in a second, it gets really blown out. And that's just because we have to play with it. So right in here, what we're going to do is keep our opacity connected, just so we keep that translucency going. And then we're going to start to play with the composite to bring down that emission. And it may take another ramp too, but I'm gonna try and do it without the ramp. So I think what I ended up doing was starting to average the two, and that looks okay. Let me just go back in here, and I did put a ramp on the Fresnel, didn't I? in there. Yeah, just a secondary one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a secondary ramp coming from the Fresnel just to give a little bit more control. Since we already got the opacity where we want it, now we can control how it composites with the curvature a little bit easier. Start to bring this back out a little bit, and now you can see that we're starting to get those fall offs that we want. So just a little bit of translucency in there. I'm going to go in tight so you can see what's happening. So just a little bit of translucency in there, but it's still emitting as well. And then along these edges in here, we still have the curvature. And so what's really going on too is because the body has density to it, there's going to be a little bit of bump to it. So we're going to bring in a couple noises, and we'll just start with one and put it on our bump. And maybe we'll only need one, but I think using two gives a really nice, unique look. You can combine them and merge them around as you need to. So we'll go into the bump there. Just to show you what it looks like. So what I'm using a hotkey to connect this to the output and switch back and forth. You can set that up just by going to your custom commands, but I like to review things before. So overall scale, I think we're going to need like a 4, and I like to reset these to 1, maybe 16, maybe even a little bit higher, like 32. That should be pretty good to start with. And so now you can see if we come in here, we get all these little grainy details where the curvature is hitting. And that helps to give a little bit of a smoky look for the X-ray. So we'll pull back here. So something I'm going to do is push our highlights a bit more with the camera exposure and tone mapping. So in here, I'm going to allow for overexposure and overexpose this so the highlights in here get brighter, and then I'm going to crush our blacks in here and do a little camera work to really bring out these details as well. So that's part of how I got those really bright highlights in the other shader. So right now you can see all these little details in here coming in from the bump that the curve map is also latching onto. We've got this fall off from the center because of the Fresnel, and then on the edges of our main areas we've got the curvature map mixing with Fresnel to really push that emission as well. And so now, because we have so many controls with ramps, you can really start to fine tune it a bit. I don't need this on anymore. What's up, Surge? So fine tune that a little bit more. I think it's starting to get a little too blown out in there, so I'm going to bring these blacks a little bit forward. Maybe pull this out a little bit more. So you can really start to fine tune it, and I think, you know, this is looking pretty good in there, but I'm going to go down to about half the scale and then bring up the noise just a bit more. And then you can really start to play with it. And so for this advanced, like more advanced X-ray, what I did is you'll see I have two noises composited together. So I've got one that's kind of big and wide, and then another one, or sorry, one that's complex and one that's not so complex. And so that'll give you bigger and wider noises, and then composite those together, and then just really went through and started fine-tuning everything. So in here you'll see that I've clamped it down here like I did in the other one, and then for now I actually moved everything up and towards the middle here. So let's go ahead and try that in this one. make sure I'm grabbing the right ramp. So up and towards the middle was just, it's the blend one. Oh, so I was using blend as the inverse here. Okay, so I had curvature as the base, and this is the blend. So I did that a little backwards. What's up, Gete Salim? I know I'm probably butchering that. How's it going? All right, so let's see about maybe doing a subtract in here. Difference is starting to look a little bit closer to the other one. Trying not to reference this too much and just make it on the spot. Did it add? It doesn't seem to be giving the same result, Redshift. I guess it does if I spread this out a little bit more. Tighten that up in there. All right, I'm gonna let the bucket render go for a second. I think I'm gonna add a little bit more noise in here too. Maybe the frequency a little bit. For this curve, I'm gonna bring in a ramp too, just to give it a little bit more control. That's seeming to help push it a little bit further. I think that's getting a little too hot. There we go. What's up, Ryan? How you doing, man? Spread that out just a little bit more, get a little bit more detail in there. So that's looking all right. I think what's really going to push it further to this next level is that secondary noise, where I can posit this into here. So you see I have noise in here, and then in here these two noises combining together. And just to show you some fine tuning of this, I'll spread this out again. You'll see how white it gets in there. And then to really up that opacity, you can control it right here and bring that Fresnel control under, or Fresnel under control. There we go. Words. So 1.65 is what I set that other one to. Let's see what I set this one to for Fresnel. 1.65. So it's real easy to lose those details if you go too far. Bring some of this back in. It's going a little too far with that. Something like that right in there. So we're getting pretty close to the mock-up one. So pretty much an overview, again, it's really just setting a Fresnel to be your base for opacity. Well, I'm glad that worked, Serge. So yeah, the basics of this is going to be using Fresnel to control the fall off from the center for your opacity, and then merging it together with a curve map where the curve is basically controlling the edges in there. So if I hook this back up, you'll see it's getting around the edges. If I hook up the Fresnel, you'll see it's mostly gray in the center here, and then these white areas are going to be picked up, and then it's being ramped into here to make these highlights a lot hotter, keep it gray in here, and then a little bit of black in there. And then when it blends with this one, you'll see it's got a little bit of fall off in here, but it starts to meet up with the curvature map in here and mix together to give this effect. So it's a little bit smoky and grayed. So when we put it back in here, what's up, Billy? If you guys didn't watch last week's stream, Billy was on and we talked about all this car stuff and it's awesome. And then, so down here, the final little touch is just adding in some bump and probably can bring down this complexity a bit. Tighten it up in there. And then if you want to go really far, just blend some noises together and just keep tightening it up. I think one thing that I ended up having to do, did I do it in this one? No, okay. I've talked to a couple people like Gavin Grant, and he was saying that depending on how many layers you have, these start to get really dark in the center. So if you are going to do something that has multiple layers and X-ray and things like that, I really recommend maybe making 2 of these or 3 of these, one for like an outer wide gamut, mid gamut, and then narrow gamut as you get closer and further away from the camera, just so it doesn't get too dark in here. As you can see, there's a lot of body parts in here, so if I come down to maybe like the abdomen area, I'll have to see. It might start to get a little dark in there. No, I don't know. You'll have to play with it, because I've heard some reports of people that have tried this method that I've talked to before making or doing the stream tonight, and they were saying it starts to get really dark, but it's holding up pretty well. And then can make the skeleton vape. It's always the vaping, Billy. And then just the last final touch again that I did was allow for overexposure and desaturation. You don't really have to use that since it's black and white. And then you can control your black crush amount too. You can see in here it goes from this gray to like a black in here, which really helps too. Throwback, dude, throwback to, man, that was like the 3rd stream or something. So now that people are starting to join the chat, if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them up in the chat. There's one other thing I was going to cover tonight that somebody brought up earlier, and just the general basics of how to use the shader switch. It's a little confusing to get started, but once you see it, you'll realize it's actually extremely easy. So that was going to be the tutorial that comes out next week, but I kind of want to go over it a little bit now, just because of how simple it is to do. Let's see, anything else that I missed in the chat? The chat's been kind of quiet. What are you doing, tablet? Come back. There we go. Okay. All right, so I haven't really missed anything. Cool. But yeah, if you've been watching and you don't feel like making your own, I'm probably going to throw this up on Gumroad. It'll probably be $1 or free. So just keep an eye on that. Or, oh, by the way, what is the shortcut for connecting or selected? Well, you have to make one. So mine that I have it set to is Control plus tilde, which is actually like this accent mark here, but it's the swiggly thing next to the 1 on the keyboard. But if you go into customize and customize commands and you do a search for connect, or actually, yeah, it was right there, connect. Make this a little bigger. So connect to output, excuse me. You can set that to be whatever you want. So I set mine to Control tilde, and then now I can just hot swap these however I want. You can see the noises that I was talking about. I start kind of wide, and I have a really noisy one, and then composite the two together and make a bump, which hopefully that doesn't freak out Redshift. It did. It totally should not have hit connect to output. It's because Billy's watching. Billy brings out the crash in me. All right, so this is kind of a perfect time to reset, I guess. I'm going to bring in a couple shapes and just kind of spread them out here. Let's do a torus. You're not bad luck. It's just the timing always seems to be whenever you're watching. All right, so I've got these 5 shapes, and I'm going to start talking about how to use the selection node or shader selector. You're going to jump into Redshift and crash with me. That's totally fine. So the way you start using a selector is you got to make sure you have an object tag on everything. So we're going to start there. Next, I'm going to bring in a material, and we're going to be able to color all 5 of these with 5 different materials coming out of one material. So make sure all these are selected. Come over here, function apply. I'm going to go ahead and hit that. What's up, Merc? I just changed gears, Merc, to talk about using a switch, but if you want me to review the XRay stuff, I will, because that's kind of what I promoted tonight. But holy wow, Raid is here too? That is crazy. It's like, man, isn't it like a 4-hour difference? So what is it, 1 a.m. there? 1:30? 2:30? 1:30. So what I'm going to do is create, we have 5 different ones, 5 of these. So 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so what we need is our shader switch. This switch is going to go right into our output, and you'll see all of them turn white right away. That's because all these are set to white. But I'm going to start piping these in. So this will be shader 0, 1. I'm just going to zoom in so I can see better. There we go. 2, 3, and 4. There we go. 130, man. All right. So nothing's happened except that these are all gray. And so if I make this red, they all turn red. If I make this blue or like purple, you expect maybe another one here to turn purple, and that's not going to happen yet. And that's for 2 reasons. One, you need to get a data node, and we're going to use an integer data node because we're going to use nice rounded numbers. We're going to come into objects and get our object ID, and we're going to get our object ID from our Redshift tags. I'm going to bring this selector right at the top. So right now all these tags don't have anything on them. We're going to go over to object ID. If I turn this on to 0, that's going to stay red. If I make this 1, now we get our purple. If I turn this on, make it 2, that goes gray, and these last ones are going to go gray as well, because I need to update the shaders. 3. All right, so let's make this green here, and this one can do like a dark blue. Oh, did it? This needs to be 4, huh? There we go. And this one we can do like a orangish color. So one shader, one Redshift material controlling all 5 of these. Now what's really cool about doing something like this is If you want to have variety, you can set up variety this way, so you can have all the same material, but then maybe you want to use a different noise to add some roughness to each one. Or you have a client that comes to you and says, well, I really like the orange of this one here. I wish it was applied to this red one here. You can very quickly come through and get your orange one. And say a client comes to you and says, I need this one changed, and maybe this one needs to be red, and so on and so forth. This one can be orange too. So it makes workflows really fast and simple, and just allows for a lot of variety. The nice thing too about having all these object IDs is if you start to use AOVs and you want to do something complex in Fusion or Nuke or After Effects or whatever, you can start to export AOVs per object ID as well. So yeah. So we've got Merc in chat, we've got Raid, we've got Billy now. So if anyone has any questions, we're kind of at the Q&A point of the night. Or I can just keep messing around, or I can make vape tunnels like Billy wants. I think somebody was asking about that earlier too in one of the Slacks that we're in. It's like how to get VDBs going. I do have a VDB tutorial on it, but I'll just cover that really quickly because it's pretty easy. You can set it up with Redshift volume, and I have a bunch of volumes. I don't want VDB clouds. Where are Which is in VDBs? There we go. Don't need Slack. Why are you opening Slack? Megapack, clouds. Let's do this one. All right, so we brought this volume in here. Nothing's happening, and that's because you actually have to have a material on it and some lighting that affects it. So we're going to throw this volume on and come in here and just do density. Let's get a dome light. I'm going to kill the background, turn on some contribution for that, and come on in here. And that's pretty much how you add a VDB. So if whoever was in the Slack is watching, you can now learn about that, but you can control it through scatter remapping and ramps and scatter coefficient there. You can come in here and adjust your density as well. This is a cloud, it's kind of wispy. So there you go, Billy, you've got your vape cloud. It's very strange. Every time I go out of Cinema to go read the chat, it's like my tablet wants to commit suicide. Come on. All right, there we go. Turn down my space heater. It's getting warm in here. Oh, there we go. Man, you guys are quiet tonight. Last week, you guys were all active, and this week, it's all quiet. Anything cool coming up in new releases? Maybe. I mean, there's supposed to be the AI noise reduction that is in Maya at the moment, and hopefully it will be out in the next update here. It's been a little bit since they've given us any information on that. What else? trying to think what else they've been working on. Maybe CryptoMat should be coming. If you guys don't know what CryptoMat is, it's pretty much like automatically taking care of object passes for you, which is really great. And it's been in Arnold for a little while now, and a couple other things. What else? I think those are like the two big ones. They just rolled out new subsurface scattering. I think I've talked about that. It's okay. It's a little bit slow. It could be better, but I can show that off a little bit. That's pretty much it. Nothing too fancy. I'm gonna actually use subsurface node for this. I go to buy crypto. If you go check out the Brograph Slack and MoCoin, I'm sure you'll find somebody in there that's selling it. You can totally trade it for Doge. Let's see. General parameters. Let's do like ketchup or something. Sure. I'm going to turn up this dome light a bit. So the new thing with the new subsurface scattering is it's ray traced now, so you don't have to do bucket rendering. And then there's point based too, where you have to do bucket rendering. So you can see the difference already. So ray trace, it doesn't quite calculate the same, and it shouldn't. But then if I go to point based, it definitely seems to give a little bit more of a better artistic representation of what I would expect for ketchup at the moment. I can up the scatter radius and see if that helps, or tighten it, and it's kind of like a rose petal a little bit. It's not really giving me what I want. I guess I could up the diffuse. It's hard for you to decide to stick with Octane or learn Redshift more in depth. I have both. I don't have Octane installed at the moment. It seemed like ever since I installed RC1, 3.8 RC1, I was getting like a ton of blue screens of death, even though I know people say that's hardware related, but there we go. It seems like I had to turn up the diffuse for this. Redtane or Oxshift. I think there's a place for both. Well, I think there's a place for a lot of the render engines. So Octane is really great for quick look dev and just photorealistic scenes that are simple. Like Merc is, like Merc's saying in the chat, if you're looking at the chat on screen, Redshift can handle a lot more that you can throw at it. You can throw really complex geometry at it, and it will just keep going. So, this isn't complex geometry, but if I throw this in a cloner and come back out here, and let's say do something like this. Let's put this in a cloner, and 0, do 150. I know I could have used a grid array for this. I just want a little bit more control. So let's say I do 500. Like there's no slowdown here at all. Except for like the viewport, because the viewport sucks, and that's just on Maxon to fix, and just working better with OpenGL and stuff like that. And then if I do 500 here, come on, spread out. May have gone too far. There we go. It's starting to catch up. The viewport is just lagging. It's pretty slow in Octane. That's surprising to hear that. I may have just killed this with so many renders and jumping around. There we go. The viewport is just... So it's funny, the viewport is slower than render view to catch up most of the time. We'll see if it catches up. I may have killed Cinema because I'm not getting any Redshift errors. So I'll go back to answering questions. So I think Octane has its place for like really simple, quick look dev, complex, but like I shouldn't say it doesn't have a place for complex stuff because I see what David Ariev does and having like 5,000 trees in a scene and like field of hay and all this cool crazy stuff and all the stuff he does with space and I know it can handle it sometimes, but it seems like it crashes, at least for me, a lot more than it does with Redshift. I'll hit play again and see if this catches up. There we go, extracting geometry. So the viewport probably caught up. So that's pretty much my only thing against Octane at the moment is complex scenes. It just really has a hard time with. We'll get render instances, of course. Oh, I don't have render instances on either at the moment. There we go. That helps too. But man, what was I saying? I think complex scenes sometimes, if you really push it, even using render instances, just Octane seems to max out really fast, and so that means finding a render farm. And Orc, from what I've heard, is really expensive. Like I was talking to somebody that sent something there the other day, and they spent like $1,000 on one scene. I know that's not unheard of, but I can send like a 500 frame render that's 4K to Pixelplow and spend $30 on it, and it would say it's doing like 3 to 5 minutes of frame on my machine. So Raid's saying that Redshift is definitely geared more towards compers. I agree. It does take work after the fact a lot of the times, just like giving it that little extra shine in Photoshop or Nuke or Fusion or whatever. But I don't think it is as far away from Octane as people like to make it. I think the only thing that really separates it from Octane at this point is just the bloom and glare and all that. And I mean, you can control some of that with camera settings like I was doing before with crushing blacks and oversaturation. You can throw a LUT on in here if you really want to go crazy with that. So if I went and found a LUT file, put it in here, it would do it. But I think there's kind of like a turning point that people that have been using Octane are, yeah, Redshift will add those eventually. I mean, they've been saying it for a long time now. For a long time, I mean, for like a couple years. But I think what's going to happen eventually is that either Redshift is going to have to figure out a better pricing model for Orc and all that. And I know render tokens are coming out, so maybe that will help. But it's like they haven't really talked about the whole security thing yet for big companies. And I mean, I can send out to Pixelplow and know that my files are secure. Wish they do a subscription though. Like I'll have the Redshift education license till July. Yeah, I mean, well, people say they want a subscription, but like, what's the difference really? Like, if you're paying something every month for the rest of your life, or you buy a Redshift license once, and you get to use it until it runs out, and you get to keep using it. You just don't get the updates anymore. Or you can renew your license for 200 or $250 afterwards. It's the same thing as having a subscription with Maxon or Cinema4D license where it rolls over every year and you pay $600, $700 every year to renew it. So I don't really understand that argument. Orc still doesn't work properly out of Cinema. Okay, so there's that too. So Orc doesn't properly work out of Cinema. So you still have to export it to, what is it, Octane Native or whatever they call it, and do an OBX file, right? So that's just a pain in the butt too. And if you want to send it to, say, Ranch Computing, they have their own weird file format. You can't just upload a Cinema4D file. You have to get it zipped and converted into their format. So it's just a pain in the butt. And I don't know. I think too, the nice thing about learning a render engine like Redshift or Arnold, Cinema to standalone to ORBX, upload to Orc, yeah. The really nice things about learning something like Redshift and Arnold and cycles and the shader graph and nodes and things like that is that the language is almost identical, and there's a lot of little things inside Octane that don't correlate to every other render engine out there, like just language wise. So it seems weird that they don't stay within the industry that way either. So if you start to learn Redshift and you go to a job and they have Arnold, and especially let's say Arnold goes GPU at some point, as it keeps being rumored, then you can very easily go in and see, okay, here's textures, AO for ambient occlusion, camera map, curvature. Okay, so now if I go in and I open up Arnold and let's do, what am I looking for? Oh man, not procedural window. Why am I blanking right now? Here, I'll just open the IPR window. Don't crash. It's gonna try and render. All right, that was stupid. Let me just kill this. Don't open two render engines at the same time. But I'll show you inside of Arnold, the terminology is pretty much the same. So you can be a lot more valuable to a client or an employer by having that kind of knowledge. And especially if you're working with really big agencies like the Mill or Digital Kitchen or wherever. Arnold turning into GPU is the whole reason. Well, I pay for it all just because I want to have the flexibility. Do I really not have an Arnold layout in here anymore? Did I kill that? Okay, well that's stupid. All right, that's dumb on my part. So I'm gonna get an Arnold IPR and put it over here. And there we go. The shader graph network. All right, so you'll see this is almost identical to Redshift. Let me just bring this down here. All right, Phil. Well, thanks for hanging out, man. You need to get your reel out, dude. Like, if you're up this late, it better be done. So, okay, let's talk about this again. So under all these, let's say you want to add a texture in. It's very similar. It's image, but it's under texture. Utilities in here. So black body, a cache, a clamp, a switch like we were just talking about, using switches, volumes in here. So atmosphere, standard volume, in surface, sorry, not surface. I want shader. Under shader, you have the switch shader that we were just talking about before, mix shader, just like using a mix in Octane or a blender in Redshift. So a lot of really similar things. What else? Color. So a lot of the color things, color correct. Color correct is in Redshift too. A lot of these float things, those are deprecated. So lights are going to be pretty much the same throughout for area lights. Shadow matte and matte right there. So that's just Arnold, right? So let me turn this off and close it. And we'll close this and make sure we get rid of that. So let's take a look at cycles. Cycles is going to be the same thing. So node editor right there, and I'm going to create a cycles, do a glossy one. All right. So come in here and come over to color. Everything's pretty much the same. We have curves, mix, black body, color ramp, input, fresnel, like we were just using with the X-ray. We come into shaders. We have hair, glossy, glass, tune, emissions. So learning something as complex as Arnold and Redshift and cycles really makes you much more prepared to work with any client that you want to. That's my one of my big arguments for learning that. You can go to render farms if you need to. Arnold definitely has render farms. I've been doing it forever. Redshift, you can go to a couple. Yeah, so Nelu's saying the same thing in chat. He's saying using Redshift before Arnold, tried Redshift Alpha without any tutorials, was able to make nice pictures, so similar settings. Yeah, when I first got into Redshift, it was still pretty much an alpha. I mean, it was officially out within a matter of weeks, but there weren't many tutorials out, and so I just used the same knowledge that I knew from using cycles and using Arnold to learn and do what I do now and show a lot of you guys the same things. It carries over. So it's definitely worth considering using a renderer that is like what Raid was saying, Raid Zero was saying about compositing and being post-production ready. I know all the arguments for Octane. Octane was my first third-party render engine. I used it for 2 years before I switched to Arnold and then before I went into Redshift. I understand all the arguments, and it makes things fast and pretty and really photorealistic. And the IPR is super duper fast. But I want to be able to work fast and get stuff done and tweak and not have to worry about losing render time and just send it out somewhere. So I just went off on a huge tangent for a long time because we got into this. Let me see. Oh man, I'm using the web browser to do chat right now because Restream's application was screwing up, so I can't scroll up. That's fun. So I'm sorry if you guys asked any other questions while I was ranting there. But if you have any questions about Redshift and you want me to cover anything else, it's already 10 o'clock, so I usually end right about now. I think what I'm going to do before we close out, just for the couple people that came in late, I'm going to just quickly show the X-ray again. Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think there's something with the X-ray, or not the X-ray, the volume material and just volume in general that's not quite there yet. I like how fast it is, but when I go to really hone in the details, it just never looks exactly what I had imagined. Um, Especially like if I hook up an Arnold volume material to a volume, I can usually get it where I want, but not not with Redshift. I don't know. It takes a lot of playing, and I feel the same way with subsurface scattering. Yeah, Arnold. I mean, Arnold is really fast, and maybe it's worth doing some Arnold tutorials too. But yeah, especially like I just updated to whatever. What is it, Arnold? Let me see. Will it tell me? Whatever the latest one is, where they started throwing in random walk and some other stuff. And I was playing with it the other day, and man, it's super fast, and for like a CPU too, it's really fast. Um, it's kind of like a little bit of a catch-22 where standard render makes more detail for TFT. I don't use TFD, so I don't know. Um, but that doesn't surprise me because I've done volumes with X particles and then brought them in and looked at the detail, and it's terrible. And I know the details are there from when I've cached them out and saved them out from X particles. I've done the same thing from Houdini. Here, I'll just go back into that. So we'll do Redshift volume, and let me see. Production, Redshift tutorials, Prograph. VDB, there we go. All right, so here's a VDB sequence that I created. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit OK. I have to bring in a light, most likely, and well, they're definitely very fast at updates most of the time. It doesn't mean they're always correct updates. Like that's one of the things that I'm kind of getting irked at lately is they've been updating a lot, and then it screws up too. Like they aren't testing it well enough. So it kind of screws us over. It's like, oh, you fixed all these things, and then you go and you check it and you install it, and they added more errors, it seems like, than they did with anything else. So I appreciate them moving. Man, this is not the layout that I want. I want RS layout. There we go. I appreciate them moving as fast as they are and doing all that. I just also do it right. All right, let's see if. So, all right, so this was rendered out of Houdini. And now we're talking about details and stuff. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go for it a little bit. All right, so rendered out of Houdini, super fast, right in the IPR, and then if I do a bucket render, cleans up pretty nicely. But there's just some details in there that are like just kind of a little bit funky, and do temperature here, and then do this flame. Need another. Come on, need one more. Make sure that's black. All right. So it's pretty decent, but there's just like some little things over in here. Well, I don't set it to 1 most of the time because I feel like it blows it out. Like if I set it to 1, You see, it gets all like blown out, and um, especially if I'm working with an environment, I don't want to do that. But here, I'll go forward a little bit with this explosion. Like the details are there, but over in here they get kind of like furry or like fuzzy a little bit, and then I can come in and start tweaking it in here, and like, why I double clicked on that, you know, and tightening this down and clamping it, bringing this back up. And, you know, I can go in here and I can start to tighten this up or spread it out. So I come back. But it doesn't really help with the details. It just kind of like spreads stuff out. You know, I don't know. I just... I want the details in there to be a little bit better. But it's awesome how fast it is. If I bring this down, you know, like even like right, maybe that's just on my monitor. Yeah. Anyway, so I agree. Like there's something not quite right, and gets a little fuzzy in the details in here. I can kind of see some of the voxelization in there, and I know like most of the time if you're working with an explosion you might be pulled back pretty far. If I go forward and really let this explosion happen, it looks okay, you know, it's all right, but could be better. Anyway, so I think that's pretty much it for tonight. It seems like questions have kind of died out, picked up there for a little bit. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out in comments below. You can do a search on Google for 531 and you'll find my site. You guys can shoot me an email if you want to. You can find me on Twitter and chat with me that way. If you like using Slack, Brograph has a Slack, brograph.com/Slack, and you can find me in there. I'm pretty active. But yeah, every Thursday we do Redshift Thursdays and talk about the tutorial for the week. This week there wasn't a tutorial. Just kind of talked about the XRay thing, and so hopefully next week I'll bust that out. I also want to do a switch tutorial because somebody was talking about that and having trouble with that, so I think that'll be really good. And what else? Anything else I should talk about? I think, you know, I haven't heard from Dave of Brograph, but he might be going live tonight to do some Octane stuff after this. So if you're interested in Octane, stay tuned possibly. But yeah, thanks for hanging out, and I'll talk to you guys soon.